Hello, everybody. We're back. And sorry for the short delay, but we are ready to go. It's Wednesday, March 6th. Dylan Radigan, how are you?
Well, I'm good. I'm very good, Tom, although I'm deeply concerned. I just feel like there's many issues.
That always brings a little smile to my face that you're deeply concerned, but go ahead, give it to me.
I will. Well, again, I mean, the obvious primary issue is, people like you, which we'll come back for later. But, I'm kind of looking at all this, and everybody's all hopped up on the high market and all the, future of the world and all this. But at the same time, we've got gold spiking for no apparent reason. We've got bonds in a touch of a rally. And we've got a sequential Russian and Chinese and Iranian hack job underway between the AT&T network, the Instagram servers, all these things. And I'm wondering, I guess I see I smell the scent of vulnerability, whether it's in the technical infrastructure or the technological infrastructure as they prepare for the great hacking. But at the same time, let's separate them. The problem, I guess I'll say it in our new parlance. The problem with people like you is that you see these various data points, whether it's the Instagram servers or the AT&T super hack or whatever it is, and you consistently dismiss it as meaningless, or not meaningless, but as one-off technical failures that have no greater implication. And yet we are in a centralized world where the fragility of the data, even if this is not a great hacking, which obviously there's a reasonable chance this is not. But the problem with people like you is that you refuse to acknowledge how vulnerable we are.
No, I don't. That's actually that's unfair and a little bit of a little bit outrageous. And I'll explain why. Because you like to create some kind of like drama.
No, you can say it. You can say the problem with people like me is.
No, you see, I'm saving that line for later. Okay, but you like to create drama out of what I call, there's. I'll give you an example. I guess the easiest thing I can do is give you an example. There's a small private plane has an issue. Single engine plane goes out, pilot makes an emergency landing, and everybody's safe, but it's scary. Does that mean that air travel is dangerous? Should I really worry because a small private plane loses power? And the same thing happens, a commercial flight loses one of its jets and has to make an emergency landing in Chicago. Should I indict the entire aviation system and say air travel's unsafe? Same thing's happening we are growing technology at a pace. In order to avoid disruption, you have to you have to outpace everybody else. In order to outpace everybody else, you need to take chances. When you take chances, you are going to have certain failures in this technology space. There's going to be cracks in the floorboards, cracks in the ceilings. There's going to be a couple of things. But the old, I like the adage, done is better than perfect. And I believe that what you're seeing right now is kind of a byproduct of what we have with our economy, which is just an incredibly strong, essentially almost unstoppable economy at this point. And it's going to have a couple little cracks, but it's no reason to creating drama over it. It's just the cost of doing business. That's it.
Let me try this a different way.
Please.
So let's use your airplane metaphor.
Okay.
So it's not as if one commercial airplane or one single engine airplane had a battery failure or some such thing. it's as if the entire aviation system suddenly and simultaneously was stopped functioning. I guess what I'm getting at is, if you look at Instagram, if you look at Meta, right, with and all their assets, that's not one airplane. That is a core piece of American global communication infrastructure.
Well, I don't think that was actually the case, though.
You don't think what was the case?
I don't think it was the entire Meta system. You can use AT&T though if you want. You can say if AT&T goes down for 3 hours, is that an indictment of?
Well, I guess let's move past the ticky tack. We're wasting
Okay.
time.
Yeah, I agree.
The technology is a central point of is the greatest resource, unequivocated, and it's a central point of failure that we've never had before. I guess would be a way to say it.
That is an interesting discussion topic. Has the move in technology gone so far so fast that it has essentially become a single point of failure? And my argument against that is the alternative is far worse.
How do you know what the alternative is? I mean,
what do you mean? How do I know what the alternative is? We were living in the alternative.
Not necessarily. There might be a way to have a technical infrastructure that is not so centrally controlled, that's not so centrally accessible.
I am going to argue that the past is always worse. There's almost no situation where the past is better. And to say that, what drives me crazy are what I call the purists. And the purists are the ones who are reluctant to change for fear that something may break, something catastrophic may happen. And I argue that that is the risk you take with moving things forward at a fast pace. And that's all. I just think you have to continue to go at breakneck speed, and it doesn't matter. Whatever happens along the way.
Yeah. So your point is, sure, you'll acknowledge the single point of failure, but even if there is a single point of failure, it's better than not. If the cost of having all this technology and all this benefit and online trading and it never ends, right? The e-commerce and Amazon and telemedicine.
In the end,
if you want to have all this,
yeah, exactly. In the end, the benefits always outweigh the benefits of advancement, especially technological advancement, always outweigh the alternative, always. So to create drama around incidents along the way, it's counterproductive and it's almost conspiracy-like.
Well, really. I'm not going to go down that road. The central point of failure is there because of the private market system, which claims to just be, Meta's just a business, Google's just a business, AT&T's just a business. What do we know? But at the same time, whether it's the networks, AT&T, Verizon, whatever, or the platforms, they unequivocally control the entire information space and really a huge percentage of the economic space. And yet they don't actually have that much of their incentive is efficiency and scale, not redundancy and resilience. In other words, the central point of failure is an advantage from a business perspective because of its efficiency, right? The same way a too big to fail bank is more efficient, even if it's more fragile. I guess what you're sort of fatalistic in saying, listen, what are you going to do? Like you can't control for the single point of failure, so you might as well accept it and take the benefits.
Of course, it's the same thing in the world of basically anything. I mean, it's anytime that you believe there is the opportunity for asymmetrical upside, you are going to have situations where there is unmeasurable risk or potential failure that you just can't put any context around whatsoever. And that's okay, because that is the nature of opportunity. You can't have unlimited opportunity without without certain unquantifiable failure risk, and that's totally okay in my book.
And does that principle apply when you look at, the Magnificent Seven, instead of a concentration of a single point of failure at the server farm or wherever, whatever it is in tech, or in the platforms, I should say, in the marketplace, when you get these super consolidated, super performance like we had last year, that's obviously a more vulnerable market than one that's a broader market.
I would agree with you. It is obviously a much more vulnerable market. Well, I mean, it's more vulnerable only because it has more upside. The thing that people fail to realize is the only time that model doesn't work is when when you're taking risk without upside. But the argument here is that, and I think it's a fair argument based on where global markets are trading right now, that you're getting rewarded for taking the risk. So, what's the problem? If you're not getting rewarded for taking the risk, then there's a problem. If you're being rewarded for taking the risk, there's no problem.
I see where that applies in the stock market. Obviously, it's sort of self-evident.
It applies to every aspect of
You're
life
saying
and
the
business.
same thing is true with WhatsApp and Amazon,
Of course.
and Netflix, and
Same thing's true with every business, everything. Of course, doesn't matter. The stock market is just a reflection.
If you're going to take the same, instead of making money in the stock market, you have the convenience of buying whatever dog food on your phone or something.
Of course,
and if you want to buy dog food on your phone, maybe the Russians will hack the entire system, or the Iranians will hack the entire system and shut it down, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it can go.
Well, that's the risk. I'm not saying it's okay. Nor am I saying but that's the risk. The same way there's a risk the market could fall apart.
Yeah,
the great hacking is a natural risk of the undertaking.
Yeah,
Yeah. So years ago, I interviewed Warren Buffett, and I really was interviewing him as an insurance executive more than as Mr. Sort of an investor guru man. And I was talking to him about different forms of risk, more related to terrorism and things like that, but also things like a big hack, like sort of doomsday type risk.
Yeah.
And his answer was, we expect for sure that all of those things will happen. But we don't price them in, because they may take 100 years, and if they do happen, they're so catastrophic they wouldn't actually come to the insurance balance sheet, because the damage would be more than an insurance balance sheet could handle. So that basically the government becomes the insurer of last resort for, the most extreme being nuclear, but again, a catastrophic technological failure, et cetera, et cetera. So two-part question. One, do you view some of these big negative events, I'm thinking specifically like a major network hack of some kind, again, not just a couple hours on one network, but a full blackout at some point for some period of time on many, many systems. Do you consider that an inevitability, or do you think that that's a who knows, or like a maybe?
Well, it's definitely a who knows maybe. I don't consider it an inevitability, but I do think that his answer was mostly correct, in that listen, you can use the same thing in the brokerage community. I look at our business and I say, there's a risk that something can happen that we can't defend, but that may not happen for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so be it. So we who cares? So
you're right. So it doesn't even go in the balance sheet.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't go in the balance sheet.
Yeah.
No, you. That's the whole thing with unquantifiable risk. That's the whole thing about kind of just understanding your, essentially understanding the numbers, and there's certain things you just okay. Yeah, you can't plan for it, but that's fine. And this is why these things don't really bother me, and that's why like outages and tech issues, because it just happens. We fix it. It happens. We fix it. We move on. The end result is we are far better off today than we were, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's the bottom line is that.
Mm-hmm.
And whether
and at the same time, we may be more vulnerable than we were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago in commensurate fashion.
We may be, but my argument is also with respect to that, we're significantly less vulnerable to breaks in the technology is so much better. We're significantly less vulnerable to breaks, and the technology is so much cheaper that it affords so much more opportunity that I'm not so sure if we're more vulnerable. We might be less vulnerable.
Simply because of the abundance of the actual equipment and its cost and the ability to reestablish the resilience, the ability to recover quickly may be higher now.
Yes, the ability to spread the risk. Anytime you can lower price and spread the risk, you have to take some of the risk off the table, the back end risk off the table. I'm not so sure that we're not significantly better off today than we were, 10 or 20 years ago.
Going to my other part of my original question relative to my alarmism. How do you interpret it? Do you have an interpretation of this weird move in gold? What I perceive as a weird gold move and a weird, I won't say it's a weird bond move, but a weird gold move and a bond rally as any indication of anything?
I don't consider it an indication of anything. I think that gold was out of favor for so long that if you want to know why I think gold's up, and why I think that a lot of other commodities are starting to, work their way higher. Crude oil's on the high end of its range. Gold has obviously had a nice rally. Silver's had a nice rally. There's a lot, obviously Bitcoin and all the digital assets have had a huge rally. And I'm one of these people that believe that when things go up, everything goes up. And, if you got tired of buying some crappy stock or something else that you think's overpriced, you just bought gold. And if you got tired of buying gold, you bought Bitcoin. And if you got tired of buying Bitcoin, you bought silver. Like it's just a rotation into long dollars all over the place. People are sprinkling the infield. It's actually, if you're bullish and you think that this is the start of a new paradigm or something, you're going to sprinkle the infield. That's what's happening in gold. That's what's happening in Bitcoin. That's what's happening in lots of other hard assets. And that's okay. I don't think you have to have a reason. Are people buying gold because there's inflation or whatever? No, I don't think so. I think people are just, they're sprinkling the infield.
But because the other interpretation would be, this is a whisper of skepticism for the rally in the equity markets, that it's a risk-off indicator.
Well, how is it a risk-off indicator if the equity markets are at record highs, gold's at record highs? I'm not sure how much of a,
No, I agree with you. It was, your explanation is probably better than mine, but it's peculiar in a risk-on world for risk-off assets to. I guess your point is in a risk-on world where it's where it's like extremely risk-on, even risk-off assets rise. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. Listen, there's a lot of people that think Bitcoin or digital assets at $65,000 or $70,000 in a coin is a lot for Bitcoin. So you buy gold because you're already filled in stocks and you've got a lot of capital out there. And you got a lot of capital chasing, just a handful of names. And at some point you're like, hey, this is just too rich. Maybe I don't want to buy. Maybe I think gold's cheaper here at 2,100 or 2,200 than I think NVIDIA is 900, which is entirely possible.
Yeah. Where it's just a matter of the story that you tell.
Yeah.
All right. Enough about markets and central point of failure. Speaking of, although I guess I could make a segue on the concept of central point of failure, Donald Trump will be the nominee for the Republicans. Joe Biden will be the nominee for the Democrats. They did a poll, came out whenever in the past few days. More than 70% of Americans do not want either of these gentlemen to be the next president of the United States, and I'm sure I know you and I agree to that. and along with 7 out of 10 Americans, and depending on where you are.
I think it's almost 8 out of 10 Americans, but yeah.
Or 8 out of 10, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I would even say, whatever. It's the vast majority. I've also held on to the belief that in the end, by the time it comes to September, October, it won't be Trump Biden. Whether, by
It's going to
acts
be
of
very
God
hard.
or otherwise.
It's going to be very hard for it not to be Joe Biden at this point, and it's going to be very hard. I mean, I think there's a chance it might not be Trump.
Because of the legal aspects, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, legal aspects would be the easiest reason. I think Joe Biden has a better chance. I think both of them have a chance of not being the candidate come November. But I think Joe Biden, when you compare Biden to Trump straight up, I think Biden's got a better chance of being the nominee in the end than Trump does, because I think Trump, as if you were to compare the risks of either one of those two guys, Trump has a reason for not doing it that Biden doesn't have, which is he could end up in jail.
And the Supreme Court could let him out of jail on a new and novel ruling. But anyway, you're no for sure.
No, of course. Or he might, or it could be a settlement agreement. Who knows that they could,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Sure. RFK, relevant, irrelevant?
No, he's completely irrelevant. He has zero standing. Zero. I give him zero.
And if Ross Perot had won in 1992, do you think we would have moved to a 3-party system after that?
No.
In other words, or you think that even if Ross Perot had won, that they would not have established a relevant
I don't think Ross
party?
Perot ever had a chance of winning. And no, I don't. I don't think that would have pushed us into a 3-party system. I'm not saying, I do think that much of our youngest generation right now, and into the millennial generation, I do not think that they really would. I don't think they support a 2-party system at all. But the fact is, I mean, and why should they? If I was 22 years old, what do I want to choose to be president of the United States between a 77-year-old and an 81-year-old, or a 78-year-old and an 81-year-old that I don't like either of them? I mean, why would I want to choose, make that choice? So I don't blame them, but I do not see a 3-party system in the works anytime soon.
Do you think that the stock market's rally is a reflection of confidence about the American political situation, or irrelevance, or indifference, I should say?
No, I think the stock market rally is a reflection of the American investor and consumer believing that both of these guys are completely they will have no impact at all on the stock market. I think that from an incumbent side, you already know what you have with Joe Biden, and I mean, obviously the market's at record highs, so they're totally. I mean, a Biden win would be very positive for the stock market in the sense that you already know what you have. And on the Trump side, I mean, his focus is not on the stock market. And I think that it would be very hard for Trump to create any kind of unless, I mean, Trump's more apt to do something incredibly stupid because he's just not a bright person. So he's more apt to do something just like wildly stupid and to potentially, create a problem for the stock market. But based on his last 4 years when he was president, I don't think the market's too worried about him. I think he's pretty much a non-factor. Like I don't think he'll do anything to hurt the stock market. I don't think he'll do anything to help it. His biggest risk is, an integrity risk. I don't think he'll hurt the stock market.
What is it? How are we to interpret the fact that 7 or 8 out of 10 people don't want either of these?
Yeah, that's a sad.
But
that's a sad commentary on our society.
Why do we? So none of us want this.
Yeah.
But the market, it's just
the market is a different market. Don't compare the market to what the stock. Don't compare what the stock market does to what we do. With respect, in the political world, in the stock market doesn't care as long as the person or persons running, which is the case this time, are not going to disrupt. The market doesn't believe they will disrupt our economy in a negative way, which the market thinks that you'll be stuck in a stalemate going forward. And I think the market thinks that either one of these guys won't get anything done for 4 more years, which the market kind of likes. And I just don't think that there's, if Trump wins, I don't think there's any chance he gets anything done. And if Biden wins again, I don't think there's any chance anything changes. And so I think from the market's perspective, it's just 4 more years of the same old stuff, which is good for the stock market. They're going to let these companies run wild. I mean, Trump's not going to break up the mega tech monopolies, and Biden's at this point, he's got a runaway stock market. He's got interest rates where he pretty much where the Fed wants them. He's got inflation. He's got the strongest economy we've ever had. I mean, he's got low unemployment. I mean, yeah, he's got. Why would he change anything? He'd be stupid to change anything.
But how is it you could have the strongest economy we've ever had and not be more popular as a leader?
Because people are smart and they recognize that there is that economic cycles are very cyclical, and whether Biden or Trump wins, it's not really going to be on them. What happens, what economic cycle is next for us. And I just don't in other words, if you picked the best person in the world to run for president of the US, whoever that may be, and we elected that person, I'm not so sure what kind of impact on the next economic cycle that person could actually have that would be that much different than what Biden or Trump would do. So I think from a market side, it's the reality that they don't have that much influence over it anyway. I mean, listen, we can't pass anything. We can't get anything done. Why would anybody think that these guys really make a difference? I mean, there's a lot of social things they make differences. There's a lot of things that there's a lot of perception, images, that kind of stuff. But I don't think the stock market worries about that as much. And the reason people don't like either of these guys is just because they're not that, they're not that interesting. They're not that smart. They're not that engaging. They're not young. Why is that hard? I mean, it's just, No,
it's shocking. I mean, the whole world. I'm back in Italy, and it's even the entire world is perplexed.
I mean, listen. The world thinks. I think the letdown after Obama. The world loved Obama, and then.
Well, no, the world loves America. I'm going to. Yeah, I would say
the world does, but I think Obama gave a good, was a good representation for America. And then along comes Trump, and basically, listen, he's a miserable person. Whether you love him or you hate him, you can't deny he's miserable, and that's not a good look, for America. And then Biden comes along, and people think, he's old, whatever. I mean, he just. He doesn't garner a lot of respect, and so from a credibility side, it's not that interesting. I don't know. I mean, the only thing people look at us and say is, "Wow, you guys have a strong market. You got a good economy. You guys build big businesses."
No, I mean, not only that, they say America is but it's the oldest democratic constitution. The Constitution of the United States is older than the Constitution of Italy.
Sure.
The Constitution of the United States is the oldest democratic constitution in the world from the 1700s, and so it holds an ideal for the world, or held anyway. And then the market only validates that, right? All the liquidity, all the opportunity, all the startups, like all these wonderful American, financial, technical, cultural assets. Anyway, maybe the secret is that there's no one, that the government is run. I'm just perplexed how the country can be so fabulous and have so many features that are so great and be so admired and so, so many great cities and so many great universities and so many great people and so many great aspects, and have this idiocy, whether it's at the presidential level or the congressional level. But maybe I'm answering my own question, which is the reason it is because the government is irrelevant.
What's really amazing to me is that the rest of the world looks at us in the eyes you just discussed, and they know what they have to do, and they can't do it. Like, it's not that easy. Like, the blueprint's here, but they can't copy it. They can't execute. Like, we laid out the blueprint, and it just doesn't, it's almost impossible to copy, which means that the other side to that is it's almost impossible to screw it up. Like, whoever the president of the United States is cannot screw up what is in what we built here. The foundation of this country is way too strong. Whether that's constitutional, whether that's economic, whatever it is, it's way too strong. We can have a negative cycle, but the foundation of this country is too strong for any one person or any one party to mess up. Yeah, they can do stupid stuff and they can pass some dumbass laws, or they can do this or that, or they can hire bad people or whatever it is. But it's not ultimately going to screw up. That's why we have term limits. That's why we have elections. That's why, we have appointees that get fired and whatever else it is. It is not going to ever mess up this country. Unless the only thing that ever messes up this country is a challenge to our democracy. And that's what we have to be careful about. But if it's something else, if people play by the rules, nothing ever messes up this country. It's too strong. The foundation's too strong. Nobody, no group, nothing can come in here and mess it up. We fiercely defend that. And for whatever reason, countries all around the world have not been able to copy this model and copy it effectively. They cannot create the pool of liquidity that is necessary to drive the economic growth that we have here. You cannot raise the capital to build what you want to build outside the US. And that's it.
Yeah, no question. The other thought that I was having, Tom, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just couldn't hear you. I lost you for a second.
I lost your audio.
Okay.
It was a mutual audio challenge.
No, I hear you fine.
But I got the essence. Yeah, and I got the essence of your point. The other thought that I was having, and I don't disagree with anything you said, but there's a strong case to be made for the fact that basically the wall is going back up with Eastern Europe and certainly Russia over the next. I mean, it's been going up for the last 2 years. And also China is in the weeds big time because of the real estate situation and all this jazz. And I'm curious whether the vulnerability in China, especially, is an obvious one, but also the separation, the deglobalization, is actually ultimately an advantage to the United States. Because now the United States becomes the only the only game in town. Not that it's always the only game in town, but it's even more so when these other places are proving their political instability, proving all the sort of risk that we are seeing.
What's incredible to me, to follow up on your point here, is that Russia handed us a gift, because Russia had potential because their education system is strong. They were basically feeding into a very strong, technologically driven economy that had a really good knowledge base, and they were starting to build, a decent monetary policy and a decent internal market system, and then Putin just threw it all away because of his own ego, because he's a complete moron. And I mean, an idiot beyond any idiot we've ever had in politics here, Putin stepped up to the plate and took the crown as like the dumbest, because he destroyed an entire country for decades to come, as far as economically and market structure wise, and for them to get back, for anybody to invest in that country for the next 20 or 10, 20 or 30 years, it'll be almost impossible. The guy, for anybody that thinks he's a smart business person, he's a smart leader, whatever it is, he is one of the dumbest humans on planet Earth. And then the Chinese government collectively, again, overestimated.
Can I just add one? Can I add?
Sure.
The other thing is, in addition, I agree with your assessment of Putin, but also it's because of his self-obsession and his narcissism, he doesn't see beyond himself, so he's not even informed enough to understand.
Yeah, that's part of it, because it is because of his narcissism. It is because of his, self-obsession. That's a good way of putting it. But because their system was not as mature as our system in the U.S., they did not have the checks and balances to. There's plenty of smart people in Russia, but they did not have the checks and balances to do what needed to be done to at least put him in his place. We have that here. They did not have that.
Or to make the transition.
Whatever. And then in China, it's basically the same thing. It's essentially a relatively new economy. It's a relatively new political system, and they did not know how to deal with their own success. And whether it be in real estate or whether it was in the stock market, whatever it was, they did not let Mother Nature take its course, because they were reading their own press clippings and everything else. They destroyed their own economy, and now they're trying to build it back up. And the problem is, once you destroy external investment and you kill internal investment, you basically just you've blown up your own system. You've burnt your own house down, and you can't in many places you cannot build it back. And in Russia and China, they threw the U.S. a huge bone, because there was money flow going into Russia, there was money flow going into China, there was money flow going into a lot of their allies, and it's all gone. It's all freaking gone. And all that money came into the U.S. And it came into our giant pool of liquidity, because it's the only place it can go into. It also helped other markets like Japan, which has exploded, because China's failure was good for Japan. It's gone into other places, like it's gone into South America. China and Russia's failure has been good for South America. And there has been other places around the world that have, but the U.S. has benefited the most. So as much as we want to say, we have enough stuff in place in this country to keep ourselves ahead of no one person, whether it's Trump, there's nothing he can do. Whether it's Biden, there's nothing he can do. Neither of those two guys, if they win, can do what Putin did, or can do what happened in China, or can do what's happened in other places around the world. And so that's why I feel that the stock market here is at record highs. And that's why I feel like, we're almost unstoppable at this point.
Because the relative security of assets in the United States is at an all-time high.
Yeah. And even if we sell off, even if we have a pullback of 10, 20, 30%, even if we have some kind of cyclicality to our markets, we are still in, given where we've come from to where we are, we're in a good place.
Do you have an opinion on South America, for instance, or Japan? I mean, have you participated? I know you obviously have witnessed it, but you're not fiddling around in there just because of liquidity, I'm assuming.
Japan's almost untradeable other than the yen, and I'm long the yen. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just off its lows. And in South America, it's again almost untradeable. There's one or two ETFs, but to be fair, it's not tradable for you. Until they figure out how to deal with their market liquidity issues. All that money's flowing to the U.S. Whether they like it or not, the money's flowing to the U.S. They have the same issue in India. It's a huge marketplace. They've tried to copy the U.S. model. They've done a better job than anybody else, but until they really learn how to monetize those investments, if we're going to invest in India, then until that point, money flow is going to be restricted in. But India has the best chance right now on paper. India has the best chance of becoming the number 2 player globally.
I completely agree with that. The only other one I would add is Mexico. Not that the number 3 player, I think, can be Mexico.
They could be. It'll probably be Brazil before it'll be Mexico or something like that. But Mexico's really far behind. Their market structure, they have potential, but their market structure is way behind. And Brazil's, I think, much further ahead than Mexico right now. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I don't trade it. I just, from what I talk to,
But you think the whole. So let's say in the short term, the big mess is bad for good for U.S. markets, good to attract assets.
Yeah.
Long term, we want a healthy world. We want healthy global trading partners. I know we're running the clock here.
Yeah, we're running the clock. We got to go, but it's a really good discussion. This is a tough discussion because I don't want to sit here and and be negative. But the other side to it is we got to be realists about this. And for whatever anybody says, the reality is our damn system is so freaking strong that it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's little things here and there, and you got to deal with it, PR wise. But the reality of it is, as long as everybody else keeps imploding, we're in good shape.
That's a very Russian strategy, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's not working for Russia right now. Dylan, I'm Tom Sosnoff, and he's Dylan Radigan, and this is Truth or Skepticism. We're with you every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Time. Thanks for spending the last 45 minutes with us. Thanks, Dylan.
I'll see you in overtime in about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
All right.